But that's
This is Mack Truck, aka the Princess of Pain, aka your one nightmare. This is Mack Truck, aka the Princess of Pain, aka your one nightmare.
I don't like to lose at anything yet. I've grown most, not from victories, but setbacks. Serena Williams. That was your quote of the day. Welcome in. This is another edition of the MackTruck Podcast here on Podbean, Spotify, and wherever else you get your audio streaming pleasure. I am obviously your hostess with the mostest, Mackenzie Brooks, aka the Mack Truck, aka your worst nightmare. Late here. Monday evening, July 1st. The fact that it's July really just baffles the entire hell out of me. That means half 2024 is over, yo. Half of 2024, as we're currently speaking to you on this broadcast right now, is done, in the bag. 6 months has gone by and we're on to month 7, which means we're into the back half of the year, which means college football is coming, NFL football is coming. You love to see it. We've got a bunch of stuff to talk about within the next couple days here. Today's broadcast is brought to you by the In My Bag Apparel crew with Evan Thunder Bradfield himself, the 3-Man Weave podcast with Evan and Caleb Bradfield and Big D Money himself, also found on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Pods, and wherever else you get your video and audio streaming pleasure. Also brought to you by the 806 Sports Radio Show in Texas and the Sip Off, both hosted and co-hosted by Megan Price. You can find those on Facebook Live, StreamYard as well. Broadcast is also brought to you by none other than Chopping It Up with Prescott Kelly. I actually was just watching some of his current live session that he was doing just about an hour or so ago. I am also located in Des Moines, Iowa, just to give y'all a little bit of a glimpse of where I'm at. So right now it's 23:47 or 11:47 Central Standard Time PM. Here in the Central Standard Time Zone. Podcast is also brought to you by the Rock the Bells podcast with Rocco Rock, also found on Spotify. Shout out to him. I'm glad he's starting to get back into the swing of things. I know he's still got a couple episodes, older episodes prior to the new stuff he's working on now. Also brought to you by Patent That Whiskey. Make sure you're following them on Instagram, okay, at Them Patents, literally Them Patents. Daniel and Jen Patton are two of the most influential people in my life who I ironically have just met within the past month. And those two always bring me good energy, and they also bring great whiskey. It's their own unique blend, and it's an exotic blend that tells the story of their love. So make sure you are getting them a shout out, giving them a follow. Make sure you're getting in contact to get that whiskey. It is some of the best whiskey. And I will tell you this, it is 90 plus proof. So if you are into double aged barrel whiskey, I highly, highly suggest you find you a bottle. Or if you have trouble finding them, just make sure you hit me up and I can guide you in the right direction. This podcast is also brought to you by Mad Noise Entertainment and Freddie F. Morris and his crew. Without him, we don't have this cool background music right now, or the overture. So, without Freddie F. Morris and the Mad Noise Entertainment Squad, we don't have, essentially, beats for the pod. We don't have, really, an overture. Y'all really don't know who I am without that, including that CCR Webflow design, Camilo Rodriguez, who is also the one who created the dope logo for this broadcast, podcast, show, whatever you want to call it. Without the logo, you guys don't know how to find us. You can also find him at ccr.webflow.io, on Instagram at ccrwebflow design, or you can just simply do a Facebook search for Camilo Rodriguez and tell him Mackenzie Brooks, the Mack Truck, sent you as well. Finally, this broadcast is brought to you by The Truth Barbering Shop, 6563 University Avenue, Windsor Heights, Iowa. Gary Duke Williams, the barber, and Chris Fats Dixon, the barber, as well. Make sure you're hitting those gentlemen up and booking up your appointments for your haircut and beard needs. On today's show, got a lot to talk about, but kind of a short docket here. I'm going to get into UFC 303 recap, NBA draft recap and news, just in terms of what has been missed the past couple days. As you guys do notice that we only had a couple episodes for last week, but we had a almost rather impromptu opportunity that we kind of just had to take in terms of that. So we will explain that getting into it here. Also going to do some Olympic trials recap. Again, some of this stuff's going to be from just about the end of last week into now. So we'll be hopping back into that, as well as the Women's Football Alliance WFA D2 American League playoff round 1, games 1 and 2, specifically 2 games that we'll get into deep details about. Also going to talk about Team USA under 20 football, who loses to Japan and Australia back to back. We have details on that as well. And obviously, I'm going to throw in a not so shameless plug, but there will be a plug and a little bit of cattiness towards that. But if you know, you know, you'll hear that here in just a little bit. And then just finally gonna end the show with some WNBA recap and some awesome games from the weekend and yesterday. So we're gonna hop right into it. UFC 303. So for those of you who follow combat sports and the UFC very heavily, you know that this fight in particular was originally touted and scheduled for the return of Conor McGregor after essentially busting his ankle and dislocating it during McGregor Perea 3. And unfortunately, that fight does not happen. Conor McGregor did have to pull out of that fight due to an injury. He was having some complications with the previously injured foot that he had reattached and operated on, things of that nature. Just a recap as well, McGregor has never had to physically pull out of a fight due to an injury at camp, but unfortunately, this time around he did. So far, from what I've been hearing and seeing personally and the research I've done, is that the McGregor-Chandler fight is still a go. Just don't quite have details in terms of when McGregor and Chandler think that they can reevaluate a new date for a UFC headliner. And additionally, with UFC 303, just in terms of the fight, that the card that was reconstructed because of this, it did feature Alex Perea, the current and now still reigning light heavyweight champion and former foe and champion himself in Yuri Prochazka. So we'll get into that here as well. Brian Ortega, who was touted and scheduled to be the co-main event in this 303 card, ended up pulling out just hours before the fight due to a severe illness, and Dan Ige did replace him on super short notice at a catchweight. So we'll get into those details. Also, for those of you who have been following the MMA combative sports, UFC in particular, the karate hottie herself, Michelle Waterson Gomez, does announce her retirement after a unanimous decision loss this past Saturday to Jillian Rochester on the UFC 303 undercard. Michelle Waterson Gomez's record at the announcement of her retirement was 18-13. She came into the UFC just over a decade ago, once women's MMA was still trying to find its footing. And for those of you who know the history of women's MMA and things like that, didn't quite get its footing completely until that Ronda Rousey and Liz Carmouche headliner in what I believe was 2011, 2012. Michelle Waterson Gomez, however, won the UFC atomweight, which is 105 title in 2013, and then went on to have a successful career in the UFC at 115, or the women's strawweight division. She's fought people such as Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who is now a UFC Hall of Famer and held the strawweight title for, I can't even tell you how long, because that's how long it was and that's how long ago women's MMA was just starting to get into the thick of things. She's also fought people like Rose Namajunas, who also in her own right has had a successful career so far, has been one of the only fighters to make two back-to-back comebacks in terms of regaining the title at that strawweight position. And Carla Esparza, who, again, if you know women's MMA and this smaller weight division in terms of women's strawweight, you know exactly how gruesome and how just effective and aggressive these three women I have mentioned are. So she also, Michelle Waterson Gomez, did appear in ESPN's Body Issue in 2017. And going into Saturday's match, obviously everybody knows her as the karate hottie. So big shout out to Michelle Waterson Gomez on a successful career. And I hope that you enjoy your retirement. And I hope that you and your family and your newly wedded husband of, I believe, just about a year or so are able to start enjoying the fruits of life in your career as it so happens. Moving into the main card and the meat and potatoes of this recap in terms of UFC 303, Ian Machado Gary wins the unanimous decision against Michael Venom Page. And frankly, I think it would have been a draw. I think just about in the middle of the second round, Michael Page kind of let off the gas just a little bit. And everybody knows, if you've watched Ian Machado Gary fight anything at all other than a cold, you know that he thoroughly enjoys capitalizing on people's mistakes and finding any small window to just show complete domination and to show complete activity even when he's completely gassed, which is very, very rare to see Ian Machado Gary gassed. It's also very rare to see Michael Page have a loss on his record. I mean, he's now 22-3. Ian Machado Gary is now 15-0-0. Again, unanimous decision goes to him, 29-28, 3 times over. Moving on into the next fight on this card, Mayra Bueno Silva versus Macy Cason. TKO a minute and 58 seconds into the second round in favor of Macy Cason. She improves to 11-3-0, while Mayra Bueno Silva is now 10-4-1. And I'm going to tell you this, I didn't know much about Miss Cason until I watched Fight, UFC Embedded and the UFC Countdown show. Did my research. Macy Cason is very, very much underrated. And I think if she gets a couple more notable wins under her belt, I think she will absolutely be a force to be reckoned with. On the flip side, as far as Ms. Bueno Silva, she is also a dog in her own right. But sometimes when you get in front of people that can match your energy, if not more, you end up getting, getting beat at your own game. And unfortunately, with that TKO due to doctor stoppage, that's exactly what happened. Moving on into the light heavyweight division, Anthony Lionheart Smith loses one by unanimous decision to Roman Dolidze. Anthony Smith is now 38-20-0. Roman Dolidze, with that unanimous decision win, is now 13-3-0. Stats in terms of the judges' scorecards are as follows: 27-30 and 28-29, 2 times over, again in favor of Roman Dolidze. Moving into what was supposed to be the co-main event for this Alex Perea and Yuri Prochazka fight, with a catchweight. Dan Ige steps in again just hours before the fight due to Brian Ortega pulling out because of illness. I almost wonder if he didn't get enough time to rehydrate after weigh-ins and things like that. But essentially, he's never really had any major issues with getting rehydrated, staying on weight, keeping on weight, and, essentially being revamped and refocused for the fight night events to come the next day. But Dan Ige, unfortunately, does lose this one unanimous decision in a catch weight, because obviously you can't just drop a bunch of pounds hours before the fight. So it did end up being a catch weight in the main event here. Dan Ige loses to Diego Lopez, unanimous decision, 28-29, 3 times over in favor of Diego Lopez. He now advances to 25-6-0. Dan Ige does drop one, 18-8-0. And into the light heavyweight title main event, Alex Perea versus Yuri Prochazka 2. Alex Perea gets the TKO 2 head kick. TKO/KO, really. head kick, 13 seconds into the second round. Alex Perea still retains that light heavyweight title. And frankly, I think if Alex Perea, I guess I don't know who else he's going to fight other than maybe a John Jones, or maybe just actually move up into heavyweight. But who's there outside of John Jones to fight him at heavyweight? Derek Lewis, Stipe Miocic, Cyril Gahn. I mean, there's some dogs up there in the actual heavyweight division. And I'm not saying that Alex Perea couldn't get it done. I do, however, think that it would be more of a challenge for him, but he also has the opportunity to become a champion in 3 different weight classes, which has never been done in UFC history. So we will find out to see who Alex Perea essentially ends up taking on next for his challenge, or if he moves up another weight class. He went from middleweight to light heavyweight and has gotten the middleweight division, vacated it, and now has the light heavyweight division. And I'm not gonna say that I'll be surprised if he vacates that to pursue the heavyweight title. But I also want to see if he can be one of those ones that ends up being a simultaneous champ, like a Daniel Cormier, like a Conor McGregor type of deal. But he does improve to 11-2, and again, still retains that light heavyweight title when it comes to the coveted UFC championships. Moving on into the next thing on our docket here on the MackTruck Podcast. Also, this broadcast is brought to you by the listeners and viewers and everybody who has shown just generalized support for what we are doing over here. You know, like I always say when we come on the show, the goal is to essentially have my own radio station, have my own radio show type of thing. For those of you who know me, know that I come from a family of radio broadcasting and radio shows. My father had several different radio shows, but was more known as far as the Des Moines and Iowa area for his Sunday morning jazz brunch with Mr. Jazz, Clarence Key Jr., who is no longer with us. So big shout out to my father, big shout out to everybody else that I've, in terms of inherited things, my granny, things like that. So I'm really enjoying the journey that we're on right now in terms of getting our podcast going, getting everything just up and running. I've got a huge opportunity possibly coming in. I might give you guys some more details later on in the week. And just for some housekeeping, we are only probably going to have just about 1 or 2 more shows for the week, and then 4th of July will roll around this coming Thursday. And if you do celebrate 4th of July in any other way outside of sparklers and child's play, please make sure you're being safe. Having a good time, drinking and driving, intoxicated and driving is not worth risking your life or the life of somebody else. Make sure you call an Uber. Make sure you have a designated driver on hand or access to get home without having to put your life at risk or somebody else's life at risk. It is very important, and especially if you live in one of those higher traffic state areas. I can't imagine that the patrolmen and law enforcement agencies in your area are not already cracking down on it. I know they are here in Des Moines, but point being, everybody knows that the holiday this year is in the middle of a week. So let's make sure we're just, checking on each other, taking care of each other. And again, if you're in an area that has been affected by severe weather, thunderstorms, flooding, dam breaking, things like that, please make sure you're doing what you can to stay prepared, to be prepared and stay prepared. It's better to be prepared than to get prepared as things are happening. Make sure you're taking the appropriate avenues in order to make sure that you and your loved ones are safe. Moving on into the next topic, that is the NBA draft that just happened just about 5 days ago. And I have my own reservations about some of these picks, and I'm not obviously going to start out with the elephant in the room, but unfortunately, but fortunately for those of you who want to hear it, it is the first thing on our docket in terms of this topic. So, elephant in the room, obviously, the Los Angeles Lakers pick Bronny James with the 55th pick overall in the second round. We're going to stop right there for just a second. I don't entirely hate this pick, frankly. Because let's be honest, Bronny James and his dad, LeBron Sr., are now the first father-son duo since Ken Griffey and Ken Griffey Jr. to be a father-son duo in an active sport together at the same time. And people are like, oh, it's LeBron, telling the Lakers administration what to do. It's him picking, there's been narratives about Bron picking the coach and JJ Redick. There's been narratives about Bron telling them that, he making empty threats that have essentially been debunked. The point of the matter is why are we out here bashing on a 19-year-old kid? He did his one and done. Personally, if it were me, if I were Bronny, and I know that I'm not, and that's totally fine, but if I were Bronny, I would have wanted to stay at least another year just to improve on anything that I feel like wasn't going to be highly touted after in the league. However, Bronny James does play a lot like his father. He's very intense. He is an assist machine. He will give you a good couple passes, has a good shot, just unfortunately only averaged just about 4 to 5 points at USC. But sometimes you don't need a bunch of points just to be looked at. I mean, obviously having LeBron Sr. as his father and being one of the best players of the game period in history, obviously that helps. It also helps that his dad said that he would take a pay cut for a veteran star like a Klay Thompson or like a Paul George, and we will get to NBA free agency tomorrow's show rather. But just in terms of Bronny, imagine being a weird random, social media troll, which I have been. Zero lies detected. Like, I can obviously call myself out, but imagine being a troll now and bashing on a 19-year-old kid who's literally just trying to live out his dream, and some of y'all out here acting like none of y'all had dreams at one point and then getting defensive about people trying to tear down your dreams. Only difference about y'all and Bronny is Bronny's not hearing none of y'all. Bronny is creating his own path. And I saw some statuses and comments a couple days ago as far as like people who are like heavily touted Lakers fans, heavily touted LeBron fans, and even some really heavily touted Bronny fans in terms of him going to Sierra Prep and then USC rather. Those diehard fans are just like, oh, you're just a hater if you don't think LeBron James and Bronny James playing together isn't cool. And there was like a picture of LeBron holding Bronny when he was born, and like super cool stuff personally to me. But let's not pretend that people aren't allowed to make their own decisions about whether they like or do not like something. If somebody doesn't like something, that's fair. Like, that's okay. That's their opinion. What we're not going to sit here and keep doing and posting on social media is making these random ass cryptid statuses about oh, you're a hater if you don't think it's cool. Well, first of all, people are allowed to think that it's not cool. In fact, there are some people who downright despise it. There are some Lakers fans that downright despise it. Fact of the matter is, Bronny James gets to live out his dream and he gets to start his NBA career, hopefully making that active roster for the Los Angeles Lakers. Moving on into the rest of our NBA draft, here in terms of the draft portion of our topic. Sha'Carri, Richardson, number 1 overall pick from France to the Atlanta Hawks, small forward. Alex Sarr, number 2 overall, also from France, to the Washington Wizards, as a point forward or power forward, depending on how you see his play of game. Tejan Saloon, number 6 overall from France, to the Charlotte Hornets, again, also a point forward or power forward, depending on how you see their game. And I'm going to stop right there for just a second. The first and second pick back-to-back both were from France, and pick number 6 were also from France. France swept, and I feel like won the NBA draft this year, because the first pick and 6th pick I had no idea about. I saw a little bit of footage on Alex Sarr just about a month or more ago, so I just started personally looking into him and just to see like what he could offer to a team like the Wizards. And really, he offers everything that they're looking for. They're looking for versatility. They're looking for height. He's just about, I want to say 6'8", 6'9", somewhere in that realm of height. Has a very good shot. His mid-range is even better, and I think he fits well into that Washington Wizards team in terms of them trying to rebuild essentially, and bring themselves back to some form of relevancy. Moving on, big Zach Edey, number 9, Purdue, Memphis Grizzlies center. And if you've watched college basketball at all for the past 4 seasons, you know exactly who Zach Edey is. You know exactly what his game is. So I don't even need to sit here and explain none of this to y'all. I will tell you this, though. Zach Edey did essentially pull his name off the Canadian Olympic list, which I think is interesting. And we're going to hopefully get into some of that within the next couple of days here on our short docket in terms of podcasting for the week and broadcasting for the week. Dalton Connect, number 17 overall from the University of Tennessee to the Los Angeles Lakers as a small forward. Again, if you've watched college basketball at all the past couple seasons, you already know what Dalton Connect brings. Dalton Connect has a very quick 3-point shot, but he also is very, very good at court vision. I think with him down low at that 3, 4, 5 spot, probably won't play a lot of 5. Will probably play more of that 3-4 shooting guard, high elbow, smaller post player position outside of just a straight center. I think if it works out for him, it's going to end up being Dalton Connect and Bronny James coming off of the bench in terms of that second unit for JJ Redick and LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Moving on, Tannen Sharon Jr., number 27 overall from the University of Illinois Fighting Illini, shooting guard to none other than the Minnesota Timberwolves. So he will join that Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, Luka Garza, Rudy Gobert squad down there in Minnesota land. And there's been a lot of things that's happened in terms of Terrence Shannon Jr. I do remember that he missed quite a few handfuls of games when it came to this past season. He was unfortunately involved in some sexual harassment charges, and I don't want to mislabel it, but that's the extent of what I remember personally. But I do believe it was just a little bit more serious than sexual harassment. But I do know that he was accused of some not favorable things, which essentially, guilty until proven innocent type deal, and he did essentially get to come back towards the quarter mid-mark of the men's basketball season to finish that out. And then we have an interesting one rounding out just the notable picks for the NBA draft. This man is over 7 foot and somehow got invited to the NBA draft, got invited to NBA draft night. First of all, you don't get invited to NBA draft if they don't think that you're going to go sometime in the first round. Just to keep that out there. Same thing goes for football, and I would assume same thing goes for basketball and hockey, or baseball and hockey rather. But Kyle Filipowski, number 32 overall from Duke to the Utah Jazz. He was charted as a power forward center type, but Kyle Filipowski has a very, very good 3-point shot and just overall stroke in general for a man of his size and speed and agility. But, and this is just a little bit of paraphrasing from other research and sites that I've looked at as far as news and information, which, by the way, you can find on either ESPN, CBS Sports, APnews.com, and other news engines rounding that part out in terms of our citing. But from what I've seen and what I've done and kind of things that I've looked at, apparently Kyle Filipowski has a girlfriend who is just significantly older than him, who has come into the picture since he was a junior or senior in high school. And from things that I've heard on, as far as the Pat McAfee show, I've heard it on 1700 The Champ, at least the local station here in Des Moines, and then more stations in terms of the Xfinity Sports Network, that this girlfriend of his has possibly kind of, I don't want to use the word brainwash, but essentially groomed him into just leaving his family out completely when it comes to this type of thing. And they said that it's more than likely a thing to where she has pretty much groomed him into pushing his family away and things like that. And the family of Kyle Filipowski is not great. And I do know that there was an ex-post by Kyle's brother, Dan Flip, on X, rather, stating that he wished the University of Duke would have done something different. But I'm not quite sure what they could have done differently. He also made statements such as Duke has already lost its credibility and pedigree that everybody knows, with the legacy of Coach K just having retired just about a season or more ago. But again, I'm not quite sure what they could have done. Like, what could Duke University have done to prevent that? I mean, she's not the girlfriend of his is not exactly allowed in the team spaces, team locker rooms, practices, things like that. So I guess I just want to know, what does he think that the university his brother went to could have done to prevent that? That's, neither here or there. Again, and most of this, in terms of generalized memory, I'm still paraphrasing, but again, most of this you can find on X. You can do a simple X search, go on to ESPN, ABC, CBS, all the other things that I have currently cited at this point in terms of that. But I do think it's interesting that whatever extra things that were happening around Kyle Filipowski, as far as him essentially dropping all the way out of the first round and rather far into the second round, I guess, whatever events happened, I suppose happened. And you can't really go one way or the other in terms of not really what you think, but really what we know. This is what we know. This is what happened. Kyle Filipowski was a highly touted and sought after talent coming out of the university, or Duke University rather. And after being invited to NBA draft night, because again, you don't just get invited to NBA draft night for people to be cruel and be like, oh, you can come and then, we know that you're not going to be drafted number one. No, you get invited because you're essentially supposed to be in those positions where you get drafted in the first round. So hopefully we can find some more details on that. Moving on into the NBA news portion of this, again, and 90% of this is found on ESPN and CBS Sports. The Pistons hire J.B. Bickersham as new head coach. He was a highly touted assistant coming out of the Cleveland Cavaliers organization. While he was at the Cleveland Cavaliers, he was 170 and 159. Golden State has prepared and has now already part ways with Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson does sign a pretty good contract with the Dallas Mavericks, and we're going to get into those contract details in tomorrow and the next day's show as well. Klay Thompson, for those of you who don't know or just haven't paid attention to NBA basketball, really, Klay Thompson got drafted in 2011 coming out of the University of Washington, has spent 13 to 14 seasons there at Golden State and won 4 championships, 2 of them back to back. Mind you, he is one half of the highly renowned Smash Brothers, his fellow Smash brother, rather, Stephen Curry. And now it is going to be very awkward hearing the Smash Brothers and seeing one of them still in Golden State and one of them down in Dallas. But I think Klay Thompson fits the mold of what Dallas needs. Dallas needs another shooter. Klay Thompson is a very good shooter, regardless of the 2 injuries that he's had back to back, and then essentially rupturing his Achilles and then having to come back from that. I think it's interesting. It's an interesting move, but I do know that he was not going to go to Lakers. He declined after having a phone call with LeBron James, who recently before that had stated he would take a pay cut to, again, get a Klay Thompson or a Paul George veteran type to add to their roster down in LA. And being a Golden State fan personally, this kind of really hurts my heart. I think he'll do just fine in Dallas, but I think he would do better in Golden State. But I can absolutely understand why he would not want to go back to Golden State after possibly feeling disrespected. And we're going to get into that in tomorrow's show specifically, when we just go over more of these details and numbers in terms of contracts and reasonings and things like that. Again, moving on, LeBron James did decline that $51.4 million player option, again, in hopes to seek a new deal. And then again, he did state he was willing to take that pay cut for a veteran type, even like James Harden. That does come from Dave McMenamin of ESPN. Paul George plans to take the free agency And again, some of these notes were from a couple days ago. Paul George does end up signing with Philadelphia, which is also very interesting to me because you have a Tyrese Maxey who just signed a max deal to stay with the 76ers. You also have a Joel Embiid who will more than likely be a Hall of Famer if he can stay healthy. But I don't know if adding Paul George adds to what they have. I don't know if an older, almost 35-year-old Paul George helps outside of just the straight veteranship that Paul George has from being in the league. So we will look forward to seeing that. And finally, like I said, Paul George did essentially decline that $48.7 million option to enter the free agency. That is the NBA. And that does conclude the NBA draft and news notes here for the MackTruck Podcast. Again, you can find our podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Podbean, and most other places you get your audio streaming pleasure. We have just updated some of the spots that we do most of our recording and editing on and live broadcasting on. So make sure you're hitting us up for those details. Make sure you're hitting us up for details about events, things like that. We will be, again, going back over our events in terms of what we have going on later this year and in the next couple of shows. So moving on, and this is gonna kind of be a 2-in-1 here. So, and part of the reason why we didn't have a broadcast or show the back half of the week because we were preparing for this event. So for those of you who know me personally know that I have been playing tackle football since I was 6 or 7 years old. You know how passionate I am, and you know that I have played with boys, I've played with men, I've been coached by different types of players, I've been coached by NFL players, and I still to this day play tackle football, specifically for the Nebraska Pride Women's Tackle Football League of Professionalism. And this weekend, I got an opportunity, and also for those of you who don't know, I did end up having to take this season off, and I'm not exactly mad about it outside of some other things that I personally couldn't control, but I just know what I could control. I take responsibility for that. I didn't do a better job expecting, out of myself. That's neither here nor there. Point is, I had a freaking bomb-ass opportunity. I got asked to essentially do the play-by-play for the live stream for the Nebraska Pride. Unfortunately, there were some technical issues on one side of a platform that we were using. So, of course, me being me, I had the bright idea to just do the rest of the game live from my sports Facebook page. That's Mack Brooks, for those of you who are wondering. M-A-C-K, Brooks, no E. And it was, frankly, one of the coolest things I'd ever done. If you know me personally, you know that my father, I come from a radio and musical background in terms of other passions outside of sports. My dad was very well known for his Sunday morning jazz show with Mr. Jazz. And if you're super old and know the old school radio stations from Des Moines, he was on KFMG. That's where I got my first famous words because I was 4 years old and got to go on his show and talk about the reindeer boots and rollerblades that I was going to throw in the garbage. And I still to this day have that tape. If I can find it and I can find a tape recorder that'll play it. I don't even know if they make tape recorders anymore, but I'm going to see if I can find it and play it for you guys because it just makes me really just reminisce and just the memories I had with my dad. Like I said, unfortunately, my father has passed away in 2020 due to the pandemic and due to some other health issues that he was battling. So, again, Dad, I know you're here listening and everything, so a little bit sentimental moment for me in terms of this topic. But so this past weekend was the Women's Football Alliance, the WFA's first round of the playoffs, better known as the Road to Canton, to essentially compete for the D3, D2, and Division I Pro division championships in terms of the overall conference titles. So we're gonna just gonna talk about two games specifically. Just gonna recap this quick one because this game, and once you hear the history in terms of why I needed this other team to win, you'll understand why I feel how I feel, but that's neither here nor there. Again, WFA D2 round 1 playoffs recap. The Oklahoma City Lady Force did essentially end up beating the Derby City Dynamite, ended up winning by 22 points. Ended up winning 30-8. At halftime, it was 8-8, which was just about the end of the Nebraska Pride and Austin Outlaws game, which we will get to here in just a minute. And the last 3 Nebraska teams I have played for have had some kind of history with the Oklahoma City Lady Force. Meaning, and frankly, I don't give a damn who hears this. I don't give a damn if somebody wants to try to call me out. Unless you have played this team with you being on another team, I don't want to hear it. The Oklahoma City Lady Force are one of the dirtiest teams in the league. Point blank, period. Hot take. Not a hot take because it's a fact. But they are very good. And I think part of their cockiness comes from the fact that they're so good, which is completely understandable. But there's no reason to do all the extra face masking and the jawing. It's always been a rough time every time that my team, any team that I've gone on, any Nebraska system team that I have gone and played for that has gone to travel to play this Lady Force team has always had an issue, whether it's referees, whether it's referees not watching dirty plays. It's been a complete controversy and disaster. However, I think this time around is going to be completely different. I can't tell you why, can't tell you when, but I can tell you from what I was watching and the things that I had missed personally being a player that I saw this past weekend out of the Nebraska Pride. The Nebraska Pride are about to give the Oklahoma Lady Force a run for their money. I don't give a damn what nobody says. And just like one of my favorite coaches and mentors always says, shout out to Coach Jen Hirakawa, defensive coordinator of the Nebraska Pride. Listen, I don't give a damn if you know my playbook. You have to stop it first. And I swear, ever since I have heard Coach K say that, those are words that have literally resonated with me. You can know my game plan all you want. You have to beat it, though. There's a difference between knowing someone's playbook or knowing someone's game plan or knowing someone's whatever and beating it. Literally. And just because you know it doesn't mean it hasn't changed by the time you figured this shit out. Like, let's be honest. Like, you can know somebody or know something, but you have to actually talk to them and you actually have to beat them for that knowledge to have meant something. That's just me. Moving on into the Nebraska Pride and Austin Outlaws game. The Nebraska Pride give a shellacking to the Austin Outlaws and win a big one here in a big way. 70-0. Just some game notes from this past weekend, and on top of just my experience as a fan and now partial voice of the team. I mean, I like to think so. If y'all don't think so, I don't care, because I had fun, and everybody that was involved and that was around that could hear my commentary loved it too. I can't speak for them. That's just what they told me. But extra point kicker, fullback, kind of a Swiss Army knife within their own right. MJ Winter goes 9 for 9 on extra points. Unfortunately, the Austin Outlaws, number 32, Cassandra Kennedy, did end up breaking her ankle this past weekend, and we said nothing but positive vibes and quick recovery and a fast and healthy recovery to Ms. Kennedy. I was talking to some of my teammates after the game, and not to be gruesome or anything, but if you do not like gruesome details, don't listen to this. But if you've ever played football and you've heard noises that don't quite go with helmet clicking or shoulder pad clicking or generalized tackling and hits, it was one of those types of noises that would tweak you out. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, for the record, Nebraska came into this game 5-1 and number 2 in the American League, with scoring up to this point, scoring 307 points and only giving up 45 points this entire season. Okay, we're going to back up just a little bit. 307 points. Because I don't know any other team. I don't even think there's any NFL teams that have scored that much in a season. Now, that's probably incorrect, because the NFL seasons now are 18 weeks with 1 to 2 bye weeks, where the WFA seasons are 6 to 8 weeks, depending on bye weeks and depending on the type of game schedule. There have been many years where I've played an 8-game schedule, and then ever since the pandemic, they have dropped it to 6. And I almost wonder if they're going to go back and ever go back to the 8-game, the 8-week system of play as well. neither here nor there. Point is in this realm of football, scoring 307 points in a season and then only giving up less than 50 is ridiculous. And it's great. Ridiculous in a good way. Like, you don't see that type of production. But unfortunately, with the type of schedule that the Nebraska Pride was dealt with, in order to make this position in the playoffs, the team had to unfortunately blow other teams out of the water. The notable loss that the Nebraska Pride had again was to the Minnesota Vixen in Minnesota. They did end up dropping that one 34-0. And Minnesota has been dominant for what feels like well over a decade. I feel like I've been playing them for more than a decade at this point, but I remember the days of the Vixen when they were one of the worst teams back then, which was the IWFL, which was the Independent Women's Football League. If you know women's football, know the history, know all about the IWFL. You also know about the women's 8 leagues as well. So, furthermore, the entirety of the WFA in terms of the playoffs always seem to have some form of a upset or a game that went completely the opposite direction type of deal. In terms of that, the Austin Outlaws unfortunately did come into this game number 6, and number 6 overall in the American League D2. They were 1-5, had a little bit of a rough season, lots of injuries, lots of personnel readjusting. I spoke to some of their players after the game as well, and they kind of were just like, all we can do from here is build. And the mentality that each player that I spoke to personally, was just that, was very positive. Like, we knew what was going on this week, or this season rather, and we're just here to build off of it. And I like that mentality. There was no getting down on each other, that type of thing. Like I said, we just hope that Ms. Kennedy, number 32 of the Austin Outlaws, has a speedy recovery with that ankle injury. Round 2, the Oklahoma City Lady Force and the Nebraska Pride will face off in Oklahoma City. And this is a rivalry that's been brewing, what I feel like has been the insemination of both installments of the most recent Nebraska women's football teams. Either way, gonna be an interesting matchup. And I'm not gonna give you any more details in terms of what we have planned for that. But just know, we may or may not be at that, and we may or may not be broadcasting the live feed again. But I didn't tell you that. That's neither here nor there. Can't confirm one way or the other. Just know you better stay tuned. Moving on into our Olympic news, again brought to you by apnews.com. Here on the MackTruck Podcast, again on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and 99% of wherever else you get your audio streaming pleasure. Athing unfortunately misses the chance to go back-to-back as the 800-meter gold medalist. For those of you who didn't know, Athing did get tangled up in this past installment of the United States Olympic track trials. Athing did end up tripping and essentially attaining an ankle injury and grabbing some track burn on her way down to the turf. She did end up getting back up to her feet and finished 22 seconds behind the winner. That was Nia Atkins with 57.36 seconds in the 800-meter run. For those of you who don't know how many laps 800 meters is, that's 2 full laps around the track, because 1 full track is 400 meters. So if you run that twice, that's 800 put together. 4 would be 16, and a couple more would be 3,200, which is more of the distance running. Furthermore, her and her coach, her being Athing, did end up sending an appeal to the U.S. Olympic Track Committee, and it unfortunately did get denied from what we've seen so far. The appeal stated that she did get spiked and hurt her ankle, as well as getting that track burn. So we'll see if something happens between now and the start of the Olympic Games. Moving on to more Olympic news here. And this one I have been waiting to talk about since I read about it, since I heard about it. Quincy Wilson, mind you, if you've been following this, Quincy Wilson is 16 years old. And I want you guys to keep that in mind as I'm reading the rest of, these notes here. So Quincy Wilson, who is 16 years old, just ran his very first Olympic trial in terms of trying to make the Olympic team. the first race for him, like opening day of the U.S. Olympic men's track trials, he has clocked 45 seconds every single race. Race 1, he clocked 44.86 seconds. Race number 2 in the semis, he clocked 44.59 seconds. And in the finals, he clocked 44.94 seconds. He broke the under 18 record on the first day with that 44.86 seconds, and then shattered his own record in the finals with that 44.94. Both days, both 1 and 2 days, again, broke a 42-year high school record. Like 42 years at 16 years old. That means he's between his sophomore and junior year, or, junior years in high school, junior seasons of track and field in high school. He did end up missing the qualifying for the 400-meter run, but is hopeful that he would make it for the U.S. men's 4x4 team. So far, as we're telling you and talking and chatting with you guys today, that nothing in terms of no other news to see if he's made that 4x4 team has come out. Hopefully we can get an update for you by Wednesday's show if we haven't found anything tomorrow. And I love this quote that he stated. He said, "I cannot be disappointed at the end of the day. I'm 16 running men's times." Like, that's the type of attitude I wish more adults my age personally had. Like, because what? Like, what 16-year-old do you know has that type of mentality these days? I mean, and outside of just football, because there's a lot of young high school athletes and that just play the sport of football, and they may play extra sports, but if football is their main sport, I see that mentality a lot. I see it a lot with basketball. I also see it a lot with combat sports, MMA, boxing, karate, taekwondo, that type of thing. But you don't really see it a lot in track and field in terms of it being an everyday mentality. But the fact that he stated, at the end of the day, I can't be upset or disappointed because I'm 16 years old running men's times. That's ridiculous. Like, he's literally up there running very similar or even better times to like a Noah Lyles, who is a monster in his own right. And we're going to get to him in the next couple of days with some more of these Olympic trial recaps and news and such. Moving on into one of the final parts of our broadcast in terms of Olympic trial news. Sha'Carri Richardson, who gets herself back into the U.S. Olympics after missing the makeup, which was for 2020 and 2021. She did end up missing that due to testing positive, again, 3 years ago for marijuana, after winning the women's 100-meter run. Her mother did pass away just days before that 2020-2021 Olympic trial. And I frankly think that in this time of day, or day and age rather, why we're still testing for marijuana when 99% of the states in this country personally and alone rather have legalized it in some way, shape, or form, or people have more access to it. And it's more of an everyday thing. It's not something that's like, oh my God, like the 90s, like, oh, you have marijuana, like it's a big deal. Like, this is 2024, this is the 22nd, 23rd century, whatever it is. And we're still banning people for smoking marijuana or ingesting THC, CBD, whatever it is. Like, there's zero reason that this should be news, frankly, to me personally. If you don't like it, I don't give a damn. I didn't ask for your opinion. This is my show. And if you don't like it, who cares? Point being is, especially with just the immense amount of medical and technology, just in terms of the advancement, like, let's be real, like, we got to get off of this marijuana is bad train type of thing, because if that's going to be such a big deal, then clearly y'all still don't feel the same way about hard drugs and alcohol. Like, if we're going to call one thing out, we might as well call it all out. That's just me. I'm an opportunist. I'm a realist. I am realistic. Like, marijuana at this point should not be a basis for suspending somebody or testing. Like, frankly, it really just needs to be put on a list that, a list of things that can be tested for and may come back positive type of thing. Like, maybe put a limit on how much of it is in your system type of thing. Maybe do something like that, but just to straight up get suspended or be banned for marijuana use is like so 80s at this point. It's ridiculous. But that's just me, my own personal opinion. Fact of the matter is, Sha'Carri Richardson gets herself back into the United States Olympic track team. She records her third sub 22-second run of her career and wins the opening trial day for the 200-meter run. That was on the 27th of June with a 21.99. So, big shout out to Sha'Carri. If you know her story, you know how hard she's had to work to come back to get this. I'm excited to see it. We're excited to see it. If you're not excited, then I think you're a hater, just like everybody else. And moving on into our last thing in terms of our U.S. Olympic trial recap here. And this is an interesting one. And for those of you who know me, know that I'm not super well versed in the sport of football or American soccer, as some of you guys know it. But I do know enough to know how important this individual is, and to be as upset as most avid soccer fans are. Alex Morgan has been left off the U.S. women's national team list for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe they're just going into a genuinely younger direction. Okay, fine. But you still have to have some kind of veteranship, and that's where Alex Morgan, I feel like, should have at least had the generalized respect for or from the U.S. women's national team committee. But again, Alex Morgan was left off the U.S. women's national team roster. She spent 14 years with the U.S. women's national team. She's also not on the 4 alternates that are traveling with the team to Paris, which I also think is crap. I spoke to one of my best friends and somebody who I've looked up to since I started playing football, and Coach Nancy Jabot Major, who his first passion and love was soccer. That's what she did. That was what she was known for before really getting heavy into football. I asked Coach Nancy what she thought of this outrageous decision by the U.S. Women's National Team Committee. She thought it was crap. Still thinks it's crap. In fact, she told me that she wasn't quite sure why they made the decision, outside of them just possibly going to a younger look in terms of, you know, how they wanted to come out as far as in front of other teams. But again, you still have to have some kind of veteranship. So you now essentially have no veteranship when it comes to the U.S. women's national team. She being Alex Morgan, will be watching afar for the very first time in 14 seasons. The last time that the U.S. women's Olympic national team played a game without Alex Morgan was 2008, was the 2008 Olympics, which was 2 years before she essentially got selected with her inaugural cap in March of 2010 rather. So completely just mind blowing to me in terms of relevancy, as far as like, what was the relevant reason for them putting her off? Was it a contract thing? Was it as far like contract thing as far as like the club team she plays for? Like what's really going on? And the other topic that we're going to touch on later this week is the discrepancies in terms of playing an Olympic sport or participating in an Olympic sport, with the Olympics being supposedly supposed to be being the highest upper echelon of athletics for amateurs. But you have sports like basketball, track and field, soccer, boxing. You have things of that nature where you have fully paid professional athletes playing at the highest level of amateuristic sports. Like, the discrepancies are flying around right now, but that's a topic we're going to get into again in the next couple of days. Moving into one of the final topics here on the MackTruck Podcast on this fine Monday evening / early Tuesday morning, if you're still listening with us. Team USA under 20 football. Oh boy. And I'm going to preface my comments by saying this. And part of this could be because I personally have played the game for a long time at a pretty decently high level. And this also could be because I also listen to what seems like far too much sports radio, but I feel like you can never get enough sports radio, but that's just me, or sporting content, depending on where you're getting your content, who you're listening to. But there's zero reason why the entirety of Team USA, anything when it comes to the sport of American football, should have lost. I'm just gonna throw this out there. So Team USA under 20 football loses to Japan last week. They were up 20 to 0, mind you, at halftime. They lost by double what they had. They lost to Japan 20 to 41. This past weekend, they lose to Australia 25 to 32 for the under 20 championship, or part of it. In the past two games, in the past 2 weeks, like the week before losing to Japan and this past weekend losing to Australia, under 20 USA football has scored 45 points and has given up 73. First of all, you play American football. There's zero reason why you should be losing at your own homebred sport to another country. But unfortunately, that's how sports rumbles. It doesn't matter if it's football, basketball, knitting, badminton, wheelchair racing down the street after grandma's cookout. There's zero reason why these games should have gotten this far out of hand. That's just me. And here's the part where I say, oh, shameless plug or shameless, whatever you want to call it. But I can guarantee you, if it were Team USA, women or girls under 20, you wouldn't have that problem. But if you really know, you know. I'm going to let you guys just fester with that one. Unless you have some feedback, then you can feel free to hit me up, call me, beat me if you want to reach me, whatever you want to call it. Fact of the matter is, I just know that the other side of Team USA football would not have let that happen. That's just me. Moving on into the final topic here on the Mack Truck Podcast, our WNBA weekend recap. Gonna go through it kind of quickly here until we get to obviously the last game on our docket, which you should all know will be the Indiana Fever and the Phoenix Mercury game. Best for last, mainly because it was the best game that was played just this past weekend, personally to me, and TV ratings and fandom also said so. So, moving on, the Atlanta Dream visit the New York Liberty and drop one by 6 here, 75-81 in favor of the New York Liberty. Alicia Gray drops 24 points, goes 8 for 3 from the field, and 5 for 5 for 100% from the free throw line. Brianna Stewart, B-Stew, 22 points, 7 for 17 from the field, and 5 for 7 for 80% from the free throw line. Tina Charles, 12 rebounds, 12 defensive rebounds, and no offensive rebounds. Brianna Stewart again filling up the stat sheet here. 12 rebounds, 11 defensive rebound, and 1 O-board. Jordan Canada, 9 assists, 4 turnovers, played 38 minutes. And Courtney Vandersloot, who's still rehabbing, coming off of an injury. 7 assists, no turnovers at all through the whole game, and 21 minutes played in that matchup with the Atlanta Dream. Moving on into the next game on our WNBA recap here. The Minnesota Lynx visit the Chicago Sky and beat them on the road in Chicago by 8, 70-62 in favor of the Minnesota Lynx. Kayla McBride has a game. 16 points, goes 3 for 7 from the field, and has 100% night from the free throw line with 8 for 8. Kennedy Carter, on the flip side, also, who seemingly enough has been showing up and showing out since the game before they played the Fever again, to grab that super tough win against them. 15 points, 7 for 17 from the field, and goes 50% from the free throw line, shooting 1 for 2. Nafisa Collier, for the Minnesota Lynx, 11 rebounds, 6 defensive boards, and 5 offensive boards. Angel Reese, who we're going to get to in just a second in terms of the history that she's just now made yet again. Angel Reese, 16 rebounds, 11 of those defensive boards, and 5 of those offensive boards. And to round out just the generalized stat sheet again, started with Nafisa Collier, 6 assists, 2 turnovers, 39 minutes played. Lindsay Allen, 7 assists, 1 turnover, and 33 minutes played. Now, Angel Reese again breaks history with now recording 10 double-doubles straight. That's ridiculous. And I almost really am excited to see how much longer can she keep this up? Is she going to just end up averaging a double-double the entire season? Which is honestly not that far-fetched of an idea to think about. Just going to keep that one touted in your mind as we move on into the final game here. That is the recap of the Indiana Fever, who visited the GOAT with Diana Taurasi, Brittany Griner, Clea Copper, and the Phoenix Mercury. The Indiana Fever end up getting a big win on the road at Diana Taurasi Way at the Footprint Center. 88-82 6-point win. Aaliyah Boston, who was just doing work and had a lot of work to do and had work done to her, going up against that big old machine that is Brittany Griner. Aaliyah Boston, 17 points, 6 for 9 from the field, and 4 for 6 for 80% from the free throw line. Brittany Griner, who also has themselves a night. Okay. They dropped 24 points, 8 for 13 from the field, and 8 for 10 for 80% from the free throw line. Melissa Smith of the Indiana Fever, big night for them as well. 15 rebounds rather, 11 defensive rebounds and 4 offensive boards. Rebecca Allen, who is seemingly enough, the more I read and do these types of different stats for these recaps, the more I see her just keep popping up, and I love it. She has 9 rebounds, 8 of them defensive boards and 1 of them offensive boards. And the assist machine herself, that is Caitlin Clark, 12 assists, 6 turnovers, played 39 minutes. Natasha Cloud also has herself a night, 7 assists, no turnovers, and 33 minutes. Now, everybody wants to keep beating this dead horse that is Caitlin Clark in the turnovers. Well, the last time I checked, she cannot pass the ball to herself. Does her ball handling need to get a little bit better when it comes to those double team situations? Absolutely. Does it need to be better when it comes to just trying to get the ball up the floor in fast paced situations? Because, she's still trying to get some of those college habits out of her. She's, running the floor well, seeing the floor well in terms of her passing and things like that. But the fact of the matter is Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Camila Cardoso, Cameron Brink before she got injured, Rakia Jackson, the rookie class is here and they're not going anywhere. So y'all just need to stop trying to find something to make a freaking argument about and just watch the game at face value. If y'all gonna keep sitting here getting in my inbox and all this talking about, oh, I know the sport, but when we start talking about the opposition of the side that you watch, you have nothing to say, or it's nothing but nitpicking, but you don't do the exact same thing for the respective side that you watch or participate in. It drives me absolutely nuts. So don't come to my inbox with all that BS. Talk about I know some stuff, but you don't know some stuff, because when I ask you about some stuff, you don't know some stuff. Point is, CC also recorded a double-double, not quite consecutively, but the past couple of games, past 4 or 5 games rather, she's had a double-double in almost every other one of them. And then she also was very close to becoming the first rookie in the WNBA to record a triple-double. She went 15 points, 12 assists, and 9 rebounds. She was 1 rebound from breaking that history. And now I almost want to see if she is able to get that touted triple-double history-making stat under her, which I feel like would propel her very fast into the realms of WNBA legendary status. But that's neither here nor there. She's got a long career ahead of her, but I kind of want to see if she can, get that just one random WNBA stat under her belt. But we'll see. They end up playing the Las Vegas Aces and her best friend Kate Martin tomorrow as in Wednesday, because it is now Tuesday morning here in Des Moines, Iowa. That would end that game is tomorrow night. I did lie. Their next home game is on July 3rd. But their last road game is in Vegas tomorrow night, I believe, playing the Las Vegas Aces, and Asia Wilson, Kelsey Plum, Kate Morton, Megan Gustafson, some of her fellow Hawkeye, Iowa Hawkeye Lady alums, and one of the best players in the world, that is Chelsea Gray and Asia Wilson. So if you enjoyed this podcast and broadcast, please make sure you're hitting us up, like, share, subscribe, follow all of the other shows and broadcasts that we have presented to you this evening. And if you just genuinely wanted to give me feedback, again, call me, beat me. If you want to reach me, when you're paging me, it's okay. Just like Kim Possible used to say. If you don't know how to podcast, bang that follow button. And in the illustrious words of Ellen DeGeneres, be kind to one another. And obviously in the illustrious words of my great mentor, that is the Yinzer Pat McAfee, be a friend, tell a friend something nice. It can change their life. Goodbye.